Dear friends, I am Father Mandra and I warmly welcome you to Bodhini, the Neurological, also known as BNC, where we explore the sacred intersection of the teachings of Jesus and neuroscience. Today, we continue our journey in the serious meditation taught by Jesus. We remain in phase 1. What prayer is not. Focusing on the fourth deconstruction, prayer is not a moral selfie, a neurological misfire. In our previous episode, we concluded that the Pharisee in Jesus' parable perfectly embodies what prayer is not. Today, we go deeper as we reflect on the spiritual fracture of the Pharisee. Why was the Pharisee not heard? Let's begin with a penetrating question. Why couldn't the Pharisee commune with the Lord of the temple, even though he lived at the heart of religion? Let's revisit the text with renewed attention. Gospel of Luke, chapter 18, verse 9 to 14. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves what they were righteous and regarded others with contempt. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying thus: God, I thank you that I am not like other people, thieves, rogues, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of all my income. But the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but was beating his breast and saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Dear friends, we cannot think of the Pharisee apart from the temple. Throughout history and across religious traditions, the temple has always stood as the epicenter of sacred encounter. Though their forms and rituals may differ, the Hebrew temple in Jerusalem, the Buddhist stupa, the Hindu mandir, the Muslim mosque, the Christian church, they all express a common impulse to create a space where heaven meets earth, where the finite touches the infinite, where human beings come to remember who they truly are. But beyond its physical form, the temple is also a symbol of interior alignment, a reminder that within every human being there is a sacred chamber, a neural chapel, a still point where the divine presence dwells. Let's return to the text. Both men went up to the temple. Both came to pray. Both believed in God. Neither uttered blasphemy. And yet, only one was heard. And shockingly, it was not the Pharisee. This parable is not a warning to atheists. It is a confrontation with something more subtle and dangerous. Religion that performs but does not transform. The tragedy of the Pharisee lies not in external failure, but in his spiritual fracture, something within that blocked communion with the divine. At first glance, the Pharisee's prayer seems devout. He appears disciplined, devoted, and morally upright. But something in the tone, the structure, and the intention of his words reveals three subtle yet devastating fractures. First, comparison. Second, sarcasm. Third, cynicism. Dear friends, these are not merely psychological flaws. They are spiritual blockages, cognitive distortions that corrupt the very nature of prayer. Let's now explore each spiritual fracture in greater depth. The first fracture, comparison. The addiction to superiority. To begin with, the Pharisee says, God, I thank you that I am not like other people. This is not gratitude. It is self-congratulation in disguise. The Pharisee elevates himself by placing others beneath him. Psychologist Leon Festinger, in his social comparison theory, explains that we have an inner drive to elevate ourselves by comparing with others. He defines two types of comparison. First, upward comparison. That is, comparing with those better than us, which can inspire growth. Second, downward comparison. That is, comparing with those worse off, which boost ego but blocks empathy. Here, the Pharisee clearly engages in downward comparison, using robbers, adulterers, and especially the tax collector as moral benchmarks beneath him. From a neuroscientific view, this activates the ventral stratum, the brain's reward center. Dopamine is released, reinforcing a sense of superiority and subtly addicting us to the feeling of being better than. At the same time, activity in the insula, the region responsible for empathy and self-awareness, is reduced. When the insula dims, the person cannot feel compassion, nor the humility essential for prayer. Thus, the Pharisee's comparison makes him feel righteous, but neurologically, it disconnects him from grace. The second fracture, sarcasm. The cloaked contempt. Following that, the Pharisee adds, or even like this tax collector. This may seem neutral, but in reality, it is veiled mockery The word sarcasm comes from the Greek sarkatsein, to tear flesh. Sarx means flesh, also means gnashing one's teeth, speaking bitterly. It is passive aggression, hostility dressed in polite religious language. In the Pharisees' case, sarcasm becomes a tool of contempt, mocking another in the presence of God, as if holiness justifies judgment. Neurologically, sarcasm activates the amygdala, the brain's threat detector. It is then filtered by the prefrontal cortex, which disguises aggression as acceptability. Yet sarcasm dampens the insula, just like comparison. It numbs empathy, weakens emotional response, and locks the heart in self-righteous detachment. The third fracture, cynicism, the hardest heart. And finally, before mocking the tax collector, he declares, I am not like robbers, evildoers, adulterers. This is not a caution, it is contamination. He believes others are beyond redemption and that he himself is beyond need. This is righteous cynicism, that is, using one's perceived virtue as a justification for judging and excluding others. Dear friends, neurologically, cynicism increases activity in the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, which monitors threat and moral disgust. At the same time, oxytocin, essential for trust and bonding, decreases. Over time, cynicism leads to cognitive rigidity and even early emotional burnout. So, while the Pharisee seems pious, his brain is locked in defensive superiority, unable to receive divine transformation. And here is where neuroscience speaks clearly. When prayer becomes a stage, the brain shifts from meditative circuitry to egoid circuitry. Instead of activating the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reflection and compassion, the Pharisee activates the default mode network, DMN, responsible for comparison, self-justification, and social ranking. What looked like a prayer on the outside was in fact a neurological loop of self-affirmation and ego reinforcement. The brain didn't descend into stillness. It climbed into self-constructed superiority. Let's look at this scientifically. Despite his religious actions, the Pharisee's brain never entered theta wave states. The brain rhythms connected with emotional healing, contemplation, peace, and surrender. Why? Because Comparison, pride, and judgment activate stress circuits, not spiritual circuits. Instead of serotonin-based harmony, the Pharisee produced dopamine-driven superiority. Instead of releasing the oxytocin of spiritual connection, the Pharisee triggered cortisol, that is stress hormone-based isolation. His nervous system remained in a state of hypervigilance, not reverence. He was not praying, he was protecting an image. Now, we understand why Jesus concluded, this man did not go home justified. The Pharisee's prayer was built not on surrender, but on comparison with others. Pride in his own virtue, certainty in his moral standing. True prayer is a space of honesty, humility, and receptivity. But his prayer was performative, armored, and self-protective, and thus it was never prayer at all. Dear friends, across the world, we kneel in temples, mosques, churches, synagogues, and sacred spaces. We chant, we fast, we pray, we call on the divine from every tradition under the sun. But then, Jesus once said something deeply unsettling. The Pharisee went away unjustified. He was religious, spiritual, faithful, devout, and yet he was unheard. So today, whether you are a Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, or from any sacred path, let's pause and ask, what has all this done to my consciousness? I repeat, what has all this done to my consciousness? Has my faith made me more humble or more self-righteous? Do I pray to purify or to prove? Do I fast to surrender or to compare? Because when faith becomes a mirror for the ego, we may enter the temple but walk away unjustified. This is the hidden tragedy of religion. That you can follow every sacred law, repeat every holy word, observe every ritual, and still remain untouched, unhealed, unawakened. We become what Jesus exposed: a spiritual performer, a religious Pharisee, not because of our religion, but because our consciousness remained closed. God, by whatever name you call him or her, does not respond to status or to religious rank. God listens to truthfulness, to openness, to what is raw and real. The tax collector had no reputation, no holy resume, just one thing: a surrendered heart. And he was heard because of his consciousness was ready. So today, let's stop asking, what religion do I follow? And start asking, what kind of person is my faith making me? More loving or more judgmental? More awake or more entitled? More honest or more hidden? Because if my religion only teaches me how to appear sacred, but not how to be transformed, then I have missed the point entirely. And like the Pharisee, I may walk away unjustified. So, dear friends, with this fourth deconstruction, we conclude phase 1, what prayer is not. The Pharisee, in many ways, summarizes the hidden fractures of false prayer. In our next lesson, we will reflect on the tax collector, a man who quietly embodies what true prayer is. It will be a bridging reflection before we enter phase 2 of meditation taught by Jesus. What prayer is. Dear friends, if this teaching resonated with you, please subscribe, comment, and stay connected. Let's walk this contemplative path together. Thank you.